My name is Amy. I'm 34, and I built my tech company from nothing after my brother Jackson punched me at his wedding rehearsal dinner 12 years ago. His wife, Diane, had called me trash, and instead of defending me, Jackson chose her lies. Yesterday, they showed up at my oceanfront mansion in Malibu with suitcases, looking worn and desperate. They said, "We're moving in." I just smiled and pressed the button to lock the gate. Before I tell you how my brother went from punching me to begging at my doorstep, drop a comment, letting me know if you've ever had to stand your ground with family. Don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family betrayal. Jackson and I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Seattle where the rain seemed constant, but so was our bond. He was 4 years older than me, and from my earliest memories, he took his role as big brother seriously. When I was in second grade, a group of fourth-grade girls decided I was their target for the year. They pulled my hair, stole my lunch, and mocked my secondhand clothes. One particularly rainy day, they cornered me by the monkey bars and dumped mud all over my new backpack, the only one my mom could afford that year. I sat there crying when Jackson, who was in sixth grade, spotted me from across the playground. Without hesitation, he marched over, stood between me and those girls, and told them that if they ever touched his sister again, they would regret it. He wasn't threatening violence, just offering pure big brother protection that made those girls scatter. That afternoon, he helped me clean my backpack before we got home so Mom wouldn't worry. Our parents' marriage had always been rocky, but they tried to hide it from us. When I turned 14, they couldn't pretend anymore. The fights grew louder, more frequent, and eventually Dad moved out. Mom fell into a depression that left her physically present but emotionally absent. During those dark months, Jackson, then 18, stepped up. He drove me to school, made sure I ate dinner, and even helped me with homework despite the pressures of his own senior year. "We've got each other, Ames," he would say, using his nickname from me. "That's all that matters." While I threw myself into academics, finding safety in books and computers, Jackson excelled in sports. He was a school star basketball player with scholarship offers, but he turned them down to stay close to home and to me. He enrolled in the local community college so he could continue supporting Mom and me. Late at night, we would sit on our roof, access through his bedroom window, and talk about our dreams. Mine was to create a tech company that would change how people connect. His was simpler. He wanted us to work together someday to build something that would make our family name mean something positive. "Amy and Jackson's amazing adventures in business," he would joke, gesturing grandly at the night sky as if he could see our names in lights. When I received my acceptance letter from Stanford with a full scholarship, Jackson was the first person I told. Instead of being jealous that I was going to a prestigious university while he stayed in community college, he picked me up and spun me around our small living room. "This is just the beginning, Ames," he said, his eyes shining with pride. "You're going to take Silicon Valley by storm." The distance during my college years was hard. We went from seeing each other every day to monthly video calls. But on Sunday, without fail, he would call and we would talk for hours about everything and nothing. He kept me grounded when the pressure of Stanford became overwhelming, and I gave him the confidence to eventually transfer to a 4-year university to complete his business degree. Bringing her to our video calls, and she seemed to make him happy. She laughed at his jokes and supported his dreams. Or so it appeared. But there were moments, brief flickers, when I caught something else in her eyes when she looked at me. A calculation, an assessment. At first, I dismissed it as natural curiosity about her boyfriend's sister. After all, Jackson talked about me a lot, maybe too much. During spring break of my senior year, I flew home to Seattle and finally met Diane in person. She hugged me tightly and called me sis, which should have felt warm, but somehow didn't reach her eyes. Throughout dinner, she kept a possessive hand on Jackson's arm, and when he and I slipped into our old inside jokes, her smile tightened at the edges. Jackson says you two were planning to start a business together, she said over dessert, her tone light, but her eyes sharp. That's so cute. But of course, plans change when we grow up, don't they? Jackson didn't seem to notice the subtle dig, but I did. Still, I smiled and agreed, not wanting to create tension. He seemed happy, and after everything he sacrificed for me, I wanted that for him more than anything. As I flew back to Stanford, I brushed off my unease. Every family has adjustments when someone new enters the picture, I told myself. Diane was just establishing her place in Jackson's life. I was sure that once she felt secure, the subtle territorial markers would fade. I couldn't have been more wrong. After graduating from Stanford with honors in computer science, I turned down several lucrative job offers in Silicon Valley to return to Seattle. I wanted to start my tech company in my hometown, close to Jackson. By then, he had completed his business degree and was working in marketing for a local company. I hoped that maybe our childhood dream of working together could still happen. My return coincided with Jackson and Diane's engagement announcement. He proposed during a weekend trip to Vancouver with the ring that I later learned cost him 3 months' salary. When they showed me the photos of the proposal, I noticed that the ring looked remarkably similar to one I had once admired in a magazine and mentioned to Jackson years ago. I wondered if he remembered, or if it was just coincidence. "I'm so happy for you both," I said, and I meant it, despite the growing knot in my stomach whenever Diane gave me one of her tight smiles. I rented a small office space in downtown Seattle and began working 18-hour days to get my startup off the ground. My concept was a platform that would revolutionize how small businesses connected with potential customers, using algorithms to match services with needs. I was surviving on ramen and coffee, but I was passionate about my vision. Whenever I shared my progress with Jackson over our weekly dinners, Diane would interject with questions that seemed designed to highlight potential flaws. "But Amazon is basically doing the same thing, right?" she would ask, even though my concept was entirely different. "That sounds so complicated. Do you really think regular people will understand it?" was another favorite. And always the subtle remark, "It's so brave of you to turn down real jobs for this dream." Despite Jackson's obvious interest in my project, Diane began creating scheduling conflicts that turned our weekly dinners into monthly ones, then sporadic occasions. When I asked Jackson about joining my company as the marketing director, a position that perfectly matched his skills, Diane interrupted before he could answer. "Jackson is focusing on his career right now. He can't take risks on startups. We're saving for a house, after all." The engagement shifted our dynamic in ways I hadn't anticipated. Despite the growing tension between Diane and I, she asked me to be her maid of honor. The request came over brunch, with Jackson beaming beside her. "No one is more important to Jackson than you, so of course you have to be my maid of honor." How could I refuse? Jackson looked so hopeful, so happy. I accepted. Ignoring the way Diane's smile didn't reach her eyes. What followed was 6 months of wedding planning hell. Every suggestion I made was dismissed. The bridesmaid's dress she chose for me was unflattering in a way that felt deliberate, especially compared to the other bridesmaids' dresses. She scheduled bridesmaid events when she knew I had important investor meetings, then acted disappointed when I couldn't attend. "I just feel like you're not very excited about our wedding," she told Jackson within my earshot. "Your sister hardly participates in anything." When I tried to bond with Diane over coffee, just the two of us, she spent the entire time on her phone, responding with one-word answers to my questions. After 30 awkward minutes, she suddenly looked up. "You know, Amy, I know you and Jackson were super close growing up, and that's sweet, really. But he's starting a new chapter now with me. It might be good for you to focus on your project and give us some space to be newlyweds." I was stunned into silence, which she apparently took as agreement because she smiled, patted my hand, and left soon after. Meanwhile, my startup was beginning to gain traction. A local angel investor had taken interest and provided the first round of funding. Seattle Business Journal did a small feature on innovative local startups, and mine was included. I was still working around the clock, but now I could afford an actual apartment instead of the tiny room I had been renting. The day the article came out, Jackson called, excited and proud. "This is amazing, Ames. I knew you could do it." But at the family dinner that weekend, to celebrate Mom's birthday, Diane had a different take. "It's just a small mention in a local paper," she said with a dismissive wave. "Silicon Valley startups get that kind of coverage every day." When Mom and Jackson were in the kitchen, Diane leaned closer to me. "I hope all this attention isn't going to your head. Jackson says you've been too busy to help with wedding stuff, and now I see why. Some people get a little taste of success and suddenly think they're too good for family obligations." I was hurt, but tried to explain that building a company from scratch required immense time and energy. She just smiled and said, "Of course it does, sweetie." I later learned that Diane had been telling extended family members that I thought I was too good for them now, and that I was dismissive of Jackson's career because he didn't have a fancy degree like Stanford. These lies got back to me through my cousin, who was confused by the disconnect between the person she knew me to be and the person Diane was describing. As the wedding approached, Jackson became increasingly defensive of Diane and distant from me. When I tried to talk to him about the growing rift, he brushed it off. "She's just stressed about the wedding, and you are busy with your company. It's natural that there's some adjustment happening." But it felt like more than adjustment. It felt like I was losing my brother, the person who had been my rock through our parents' divorce, the person who had believed in me when no one else did, and I didn't know how to stop it. The week before the wedding, my company secured its first major contract with a regional retail chain. It was the validation I had been working toward, proof that my concept wasn't just viable, but valuable. I was excited to share the news with Jackson at the rehearsal dinner. I thought maybe my success would finally make Diane see me as an asset to the family rather than competition. I was wrong, so very wrong. The rehearsal dinner was held at an upscale restaurant overlooking Lake Washington. Crystal glasses caught the light from overhead chandeliers, and white roses adorned every table. I arrived a few minutes late, having come directly from a meeting with my new clients. As I entered, I spotted Jackson at the center table, Diane beside him in a cream-colored dress that made her look angelic. "Sorry I'm late," I said, sliding into my assigned seat, noticeably far from Jackson. "Traffic was terrible." Waved off my apology with a smile, but Diane's lips tightened. "We were about to give the toast without you," she said, her voice lilting with false sweetness. Throughout the appetizer course, I tried to catch Jackson's eye, eager to share my good news, but Diane kept him engaged in conversation with her parents. It wasn't until the main course arrived that I finally had a moment. "Jack, guess what?" I leaned across the table, unable to contain my excitement. "Remember that retail chain I mentioned? They signed the contract today." For a brief moment, I saw the old Jackson, his eyes lighting up with genuine pride. "That's incredible, Ames. I knew you could. Should we check if the photographer has arrived yet? I'm worried about the lighting for the family photos." Jackson's attention immediately shifted, his moment of pride in me forgotten. "I'm sure he's here, but I can check," he said, already reaching for his phone. Diane turned to me with a tight smile. "That's nice about your little project, Amy. It's good to have hobbies." My excitement deflated like a punctured balloon. This wasn't a hobby. It was my career, my dream. But I swallowed the correction, not wanting to create a scene at their rehearsal dinner. As dinner progressed, I excused myself to use the restroom. Just as I was about to push open the door, I heard Diane's voice inside, along with two of her bridesmaids. I swear she times these announcements perfectly to steal attention. First, the feature in that business journal right before my bridal shower, and now this contract right before the wedding. She seems nice, though, one bridesmaid offered. Please, Diane scoffed. She's new money trash trying to act like she's something special because of some tech startup. Did you see her shoes? Last season's clearance rack. And she thinks she's going to build the next Amazon. Jackson feels obligated to support her little delusions because of their childhood, but I'm so tired of her trying to one-up me at every turn. I stood frozen outside the door, the words cutting through me like physical blows. New money trash. Trying to one-up her. I had never thought of our relationship as a competition. Rather than enter and confront her in front of her bridesmaids, I quietly returned to the table, my mind spinning. Throughout the remainder of dinner, I couldn't focus on the conversations around me. Diane's words echoed in my head, alongside memories of every dismissive comment, every scheduling conflict, every subtle undermining of my relationship with Jackson. After dinner, as guests mingled with drinks, I found Diane momentarily alone by the dessert table. This was my chance to address what I'd heard, privately, away from the crowd. Diane, could we talk for a moment? I asked, keeping my voice low and calm. Surprise flickered across her face before her usual mask of pleasantness returned. Of course, sis. What's up? I led her to a quiet corner of the restaurant's patio. I overheard what you said in the bathroom earlier, I said directly, about me being new money trash and trying to steal attention from you. You were eavesdropping on me. I was going to the bathroom and heard you through the door, I clarified. But that's not the point. I've never tried to compete with you, Diane. I've only ever wanted to be part of my brother's life and have a good relationship with you. Right, she sneered, dropping the pleasant facade entirely. That's why you had to announce your big contract tonight at my rehearsal dinner. That's why you had to come back to Seattle instead of staying in California with your fancy Stanford friends. I came back because Seattle is my home, and because I wanted to be close to Jackson. He doesn't need you anymore, she hissed, her voice low but venomous. He has me now. He's my family. You're just the needy little sister who can't let go. That's not fair, I said, feeling tears building behind my eyes. Jackson and I have always been close. There's room in his life for both of us. Is there? She challenged. Because from where I stand, you're constantly trying to pull his attention away from me, from our future. Your little business venture, your weekly dinners, your inside jokes. It's pathetic, really. Her words struck with precision, targeting insecurities I didn't even know I had. Was I clinging too tightly to my relationship with Jackson? Was I failing to respect the new boundaries of his upcoming marriage? Before I could respond, Diane's face suddenly crumpled and tears sprang to her eyes. I was momentarily confused by the abrupt change until I heard footsteps behind me. What's going on here? Jackson's voice was tight with concern as he approached, eyes fixed on Diane's tears. Diane cut me off with a sob. She said my family isn't good enough for her, Diane cried, turning to Jackson. She said I'm trying to cut her out of your life when I've done everything to include her. I made her maid of honor, invited her to everything, and she still hates me. What? I gasped, stunned by the blatant lie. That's not what I said at all. Jackson's eyes, usually warm when they looked at me, had turned cold and hard. I've heard enough, he said, moving to put an arm around Diane. I've watched you pull away from this wedding for months, Amy. You're always too busy, always have some excuse. That's not fair, I protested. I've been building a company from nothing. You know how much work that takes. What I know, he said, his voice rising, is that you've never given Diane a chance. You've been jealous from day one that I found someone else to care about besides you. The accusation hit like a physical blow. That's not true, I whispered. Isn't it? He challenged. Every time we're together, you find some way to bring the conversation back to you, to your company, to your accomplishments. I thought you'd be proud, I said, my voice breaking. You always said we'd built something together. That was before you decided you were too good for everyone else, he snapped. Diane was still crying softly against his shoulder, but I caught the briefest flash of triumph in her eyes when Jackson wasn't looking. Jackson, please. I reached for his arm. She's manipulating you. She called me trash in the bathroom. Ask her bridesmaids. They were there. His face darkened further. Now you're calling my fiancé a liar. I'm telling you what happened, I insisted, desperation creeping into my voice. What happened next is still seared in my memory, a moment that changed everything between us. Jackson suddenly moved forward, pushing me back against the patio railing with enough force that I stumbled. His face was contorted with an anger I had never seen directed at me before. You've always been selfish, he spat, his voice low and dangerous, always thinking about yourself first. Well, I'm done putting you first. Don't come to my wedding. The physical push was shocking, but his words hurt far more. I steadied myself against the railing, aware that several guests had noticed the commotion and were watching. No one stepped forward. No one asked if I was okay. Jackson, I said, my voice barely a whisper. This isn't you. You don't know me anymore, he said coldly, turning away. Come on, Diane, let's get back to our real guests. As they walked away, Diane tugged securely under his arm. She glanced back at me with an expression I can only describe as victorious. In that moment, I knew I had lost my brother. I gathered my purse with shaking hands and slipped out of the restaurant, tears blurring my vision. In my car, I sent Jackson a text. When you're ready to hear the truth, I'll be here. I love you. That text went unanswered, and for the next 12 years, so were every other attempt I made to reach my brother. The morning after the rehearsal dinner, I woke up with swollen eyes and an ache in my chest that felt physical. My phone showed no missed calls or messages from Jackson. Instead, there was a group text from Diane to all the bridesmaids, stating that due to family issues, I would no longer be participating in the wedding. No one reached out to ask for my side of the story. That day, I threw myself into work with a new kind of desperation. If my brother could discard me so easily, I would build a life where I didn't need anyone. My company would become my focus, my identity, my family. The first 3 months were the hardest. I developed a routine that left no room for grief. Wake up at 5, work until midnight, collapse into dreamless sleep, repeat. I lost weight, my skin grew pale, but my company flourished under my relentless attention. The irony wasn't lost on me that the very success Diane had resented was now my lifeline. 6 months after the wedding, I attempted to reach out to Jackson again. I sent a simple email. I miss you. Can we talk? The response came 3 days later, not from Jackson, but from Diane, using his email account. Jackson has moved on. Please respect his wishes and stop contacting him. Through our mother, I learned that Diane had convinced Jackson I was toxic to their marriage, that I had always been jealous of his relationship, that I had deliberately tried to ruin their wedding. Mom tried to mediate, to explain that Diane was twisting things, but Jackson shut her down too. You always took Amy's side, he told her, creating yet another rift in our already fractured family. My first investor, Martin, became not just a business partner, but a friend who saw me through those dark early days. Channel it, he advised when I confided in him about Jackson. Take that pain and turn it into drive. Success is the best revenge. I followed his advice, perhaps too well. Within 2 years, my company had grown from a small startup to a regional player in the tech scene. We moved to larger offices, hired 20 employees, and secured a second round of funding. I was featured in Seattle Business Magazine's 30 Under 30 list. I sent a copy to Jackson's address with no note. It was returned unopened. In the 3rd year of our separation, our maternal grandfather died. The funeral was the first time I saw Jackson since the rehearsal dinner. He stood on the opposite side of the grave, Diane beside him in somber black, her hand protectively on her slightly swollen belly. My first niece or nephew, I realized, with the pang of grief for all I was missing. I approached them after the service, hope fluttering in my chest despite everything. "Jackson, I'm so sorry about Grandpa." He looked at me as if I were a stranger, nodded curtly, and guided Diane away without a word. That night, I cried for the first time in months. Through Mom, I learned about the birth of my niece, Lily. Then, 2 years later, my nephew, Noah. I sent gifts for both births and every birthday thereafter. I never received acknowledgement, but Mom assured me the gifts were received. "He keeps them," she told me once. Diane wanted to donate them, but he insisted the kids keep them. It was a small comfort, a tiny thread still connecting us. As my company continued to grow, I made the decision to expand to California. The move was partly business, partly personal. Seattle held too many ghosts, too many memories. Silicon Valley offered new opportunities, new connections, and most importantly, distance from the constant reminder of Jackson's absence. I purchased the property in Malibu, an indulgence that surprised even me. It was far more house than I needed, a modern, glass and steel structure perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The realtor called it an entertainer's dream, which was ironic given my solitary lifestyle, but something about the vastness of the ocean view spoke to me, made me feel less alone. The isolation of being cut off from my only sibling gradually eased as I built what therapists call a chosen family. Martin and his wife included me in their holiday celebrations. My chief technology officer, Ela, became the sister I no longer had in practice. My executive assistant, Tony, appointed himself my personal cheerleader and occasional conscience. "You need to date," he declared 5 years into my California life. "Successful, gorgeous." Tech CEO living like a nun. It's tragic. To placate him, I went on a few dates. Even had a relationship that lasted nearly 2 years with David, another tech entrepreneur who understood my devotion to work. But when he proposed, I realized I couldn't say yes. There was still a wall around my heart that no one had been able to scale since Jackson's betrayal. "You have abandonment issues," my therapist, Dr. Weber, explained during one of our weekly sessions. "Your brother was your primary attachment figure after your parents' divorce. His reaction triggered your deepest insecurities." Understanding the psychology didn't make it hurt less, but therapy gave me tools to process the pain. I learned to separate Jackson's actions from my worth as a person. I learned that forgiveness wasn't about excusing what happened, but about freeing myself from the burden of resentment. Throughout these years, I continued to get occasional updates about Jackson's life through Mom. His marketing career had stalled after the company he worked for downsized. He and Diane had bought a house in an affluent suburb of Seattle, stretching their finances thin to keep up appearances. Lily and Noah were growing into kind, intelligent children, despite their mother's materialistic influence. On my 32nd birthday, I received a LinkedIn request from Jackson. My heart raced as I accepted, hoping it might be the first step toward reconciliation. But no message followed. No explanation for the 12 years of silence. Just a digital connection that meant nothing in the real world where it mattered. The following year, Mom told me that Jackson and Diane were having financial difficulties. The housing market had crashed, their mortgage was underwater, and Jackson had been passed over for a promotion twice. I offered to help anonymously through Mom, but she said Jackson had refused, his pride still intact, even as his life was crumbling. Diane still talks about you sometimes, Mom said during one of our weekly calls. She follows your company in the news. I think she's both jealous and impressed by what you've built. I had built something impressive. My company had grown to over 300 employees across 3 offices. We'd gone public the previous year, making me a multimillionaire on paper. I'd been featured in Forbes and appeared on CNBC discussing the future of AI in small business applications. On the surface, I had everything. But success is cold comfort on holidays and birthdays. It doesn't call when you're sick or remember your inside jokes. It doesn't share childhood memories or know exactly what to say when you're sad. As I approached my mid-30s, I had achieved more professionally than I had ever dreamed possible. But the absence of Jackson still felt like a phantom limb, gone, but somehow still aching. Then yesterday happened, upending everything I thought I knew about closure and forgiveness. Yesterday began like any other Tuesday. I woke at 5:30, swam 40 laps in my infinity pool, overlooking the ocean, then settled in my home office for early morning video calls with our East Coast clients. The California sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting geometric patterns across my minimalist workspace. By 10, I had cleared my most urgent emails and was reviewing a new acquisition proposal when my security system pinged with an alert. Visitors at main gate flashed across my tablet screen, accompanied by a video feed. I nearly dropped my coffee mug when I saw who was standing there. Jackson, looking older and worn around the edges, his once athletic frame now slightly soft in the middle. Beside him stood Diane, her perfect blonde hair now highlighted with strategic caramel streaks to hide the gray, her smile tight and forced. And behind them, 2 children I had only seen in photos, sent by Mom. Lily, now 11, with Jackson's dark hair and serious eyes, and Noah, 9, fidgeting nervously and kicking at the gravel driveway. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I could hear it in my ears. 12 years. 12 years of silence. And now they were standing at gate as if they had every right to be there. My hand hovered over the intercom button. I could pretend I wasn't home. I could have my security service tell them to leave. I had every right to refuse them entry after everything that had happened. But something in Jackson's posture, a defeated slump to his shoulders I had never seen before, made me press the button. "I'll be right down," I said, my voice remarkably steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. I took a moment to compose myself, checking my reflection in the hallway mirror. At 34, I looked different than the last time Jackson had seen me. More confident, more polished. The scared, hurt young woman from the rehearsal dinner had been replaced by someone stronger, someone who had built an empire from the ashes of that pain. The walk down my long, curved driveway to the gate felt like walking to my own execution. Each step brought me closer to confronting the past I had tried so hard to put behind me. By the time I reached the gate, my initial shock had hardened into a protective shell of composure. Up close, Jackson looked even more worn than on the security camera. Fine lines etched the corners of his eyes, and a permanent furrow had settled between his brows. Diane's forced smile faltered when she saw me, her eyes quickly taking inventory of my cashmere sweater, designer jeans, and the subtle diamond studs in my ears, all evidence of the success she had once dismissed. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The children shifted uncomfortably in the silence. Amy? Jackson finally said my name, sounding strange in his voice, after so many years. You look good. Thank you, I replied, not returning the platitude because it would have been a lie. He did not look good. He looked exhausted and stressed. This is unexpected. Another awkward silence followed before Diane stepped forward, her smile widening to something almost manic. Your home is beautiful, she gushed, gesturing to the modern structure visible at the top of the driveway. We saw it in that Architectural Digest spread last year. It's even more impressive in person. They had been following my life in magazines while shutting me out of theirs. The irony was not lost on me. What brings you to Malibu? I asked, directing the question at Jackson, though I suspected I already knew the answer. He cleared his throat, looking anywhere but directly at me. We've hit some rough patches lately. I lost my job about 6 months ago. The company was acquired, and they eliminated my entire department. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and despite everything, I meant it. We've been struggling to keep up with the mortgage. The bank, they've foreclosed last month. Diane interjected, her voice pitched high with false brightness. We've been staying with friends, but you know how that is, wearing out our welcome. She laughed, a brittle sound. Then we remembered you have this gorgeous place with probably a dozen spare bedrooms. Jackson at least had the decency to look uncomfortable with her directness. What Diane means is we're in a tough spot, and we're hoping for a fresh start. California has better opportunities for my skill set, and the kids could really use some stability right now. I looked at Lily and Noah, who were watching this exchange with the weary expressions of adults who had been witnessing adult problems for too long. My heart ached for them. Innocent participants in their parents' poor decisions. So you came to visit? I asked, deliberately obtuse, forcing them to articulate exactly what they were asking for. Diane's smile faltered again. Well, actually, we were hoping we could stay here, just until we get back on our feet. A few months, maybe. We're family, after all. Jackson finally met my eyes with what looked like genuine hope. Family. The word hung in the air between us, loaded with 12 years of absence. It was then that I noticed the car parked behind them on the street, packed to the roof with suitcases and boxes. They hadn't come to ask. They had come assuming I would say yes, assuming that family obligation would override 12 years of silence and pain. You want to move in? I stated flatly, not as a question. Just temporarily, Diane quickly assured me, though the amount of luggage in their car suggested otherwise. We've already enrolled the kids in the local school. Jackson has some promising interviews lined up. They had made all these arrangements without even speaking to me first, without so much as a phone call to test the waters. The audacity was breathtaking. I know this is sudden, Jackson said, apparently reading the disbelief on my face. And I know we have a lot to talk about. A lot of water under the bridge, but we're really in a bind here. Ames. The childhood nickname unused for 12 years struck me like a physical blow. How dare he invoke our closeness now when it served his purpose? Diane stepped closer to the gate, her expression shifting to one of practiced contrition. I know you and I have had our differences in the past, she said, lowering her voice to a confidential tone. But that was so long ago, just silly misunderstandings. We've all grown up since then, haven't we? silly misunderstandings, as if she hadn't deliberately driven a wedge between me and my brother, as if he hadn't pushed me and cut me out of his life for 12 years. "So, can you open the gate already?" Diane asked, her impatient tone betraying the insincerity of her apology. "The kids are tired from the drive, and we have a lot of unpacking to do." I stood there, the California sun warm on my back, looking at the family my brother had chosen over me, now expecting me to welcome them with open arms because they needed something from me. The decision I made in that moment would define not just our relationship moving forward, but the kind of person I had become in the years of our separation. I took a deep breath, feeling the ocean breeze against my skin, buying myself a moment to process the swirl of emotions inside me. Memories flashed through my mind. Jackson defending me from bullies, sitting on the roof planning our futures, the shock of his hands pushing me against that railing, 12 birthdays without a call, 12 Christmases without my brother. "Before I decide anything," I said carefully, "I need to ask you something, Jackson." I met his eyes directly. "Did you ever believe me about what happened that night? About what Diane really said?" Jackson shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Diane, whose smile had frozen in place. The children watched with curious expressions, clearly unfamiliar with this history. "I," Jackson began, then stopped, clearing his throat. "I took my wife's side. That's what husbands do." "That's not what I asked," I pressed, keeping my voice level. "Did you ever consider that I might have been telling the truth?" Diane interjected before he could answer. "That's all water under the bridge now," she said with a dismissive wave. "Ancient history. We were all younger, more dramatic. What matters is family sticking together now, right?" I ignored her, keeping my focus on Jackson. 12 years, Jackson. 12 years without a word from you. No calls on my birthday, no response when Grandpa died and I reached out to you. Nothing when Mom had her cancer scare 3 years ago. "You know about that?" he asked, surprise evident in his voice. "Of course I know. I flew back every weekend during her treatments. Where were you?" "Mom didn't want to worry us," he mumbled, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. "Can we talk about this inside?" Diane interrupted, gesturing toward the house. "It's hot out here and the kids are thirsty." I regarded her coolly. "No, I think we need to be very clear about things before we go any further." I turned back to Jackson. "You pushed me. You called me selfish. You cut me out of your life completely because your wife told you I said something I never said." Jackson had the grace to look ashamed. "I'm sorry if you felt hurt by that," he offered, the apology as weak as it was belated. "If I felt hurt," I repeated, incredulous.
The
"I
person
didn't
I trusted
feel
most in the
hurt,
world.
Jackson. I
People make
was
mistakes,"
hurt
Diane cut
by
in,
my
her
brother.
tone sharpening. "Are you going to hold a grudge forever? Is that the kind of person you've become, all alone in your big fancy house?" The accusation might have stung once, but I had spent too many hours in therapy to be manipulated by it now. "This isn't about a grudge," I said calmly. "This is about accountability and boundaries." Noah tugged at his father's sleeve. "Dad, are we going to live here or not?" he asked, the directness of childhood cutting through the adult tension. His question brought me to the decision point I had been approaching since seeing them on my security camera. What kind of person had I become? Was I someone who would turn away family in need, even family who had hurt me deeply? Or was I someone who could rise above past pain to offer help? The answer came to me with surprising clarity, and I felt a smile form on my lips. Not the tight, forced smile Diane wore, but a genuine expression of peace with my decision. "I won't be opening my home to you," I said simply. Diane's mouth dropped open. "Excuse me?" "You cut me out of your lives for 12 years," I continued, my voice steady. You don't get to show up now without so much as a phone call first and expect to move in because it's convenient for you. But we're family, Jackson protested weakly. Family respects each other. Family listens to each other. Family doesn't disappear for 12 years and then return only when they need something. Diane's false pleasantness evaporated entirely. So that's it. You're going to leave us homeless because of some ancient grudge? Real mature, Amy. I didn't say I wouldn't help you, I clarified. I'm just not inviting you to live with me. That would be unhealthy for all of us given our history. Jackson looked confused. Then what are you saying? I'll pay for a furnished apartment for 6 months, and I'll connect you with some contacts who might have job opportunities. That should give you time to get back on your feet without the pressure of immediate housing costs. The offer hung in the air between us. It was generous by any objective standard, but not what they had come expecting. Diane's face flushed with anger. We don't need your charity, she snapped. It's not charity, I replied evenly. It's family helping family, but with appropriate boundaries. You always thought you were better than us, Diane hissed, her mask falling away completely. Little Miss Perfect, with her tech company and her ocean mansion. Mom, Lily interrupted, looking mortified. Stop it. The simple admonishment from her daughter seemed to deflate Diane somewhat. She crossed her arms and turned away, leaving Jackson to respond. He looked torn, pride warring with practical necessity. I don't know what to say, he finally admitted. Say thank you, Lily suggested quietly, earning herself a glare from her mother. The kids shouldn't suffer because of adult conflicts, I said, looking at my niece and nephew properly for the first time. I'd like to get to know them, if that's something they'd want too. We could start with lunch this weekend somewhere neutral. Lily's face brightened. Are you really our aunt, the one who sends the books every birthday? I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. That's me. Your gifts are always the best ones, way better than Grandma Miller's itchy sweaters. Despite everything, I laughed, and for a brief moment, Jackson did too, our eyes meeting in shared amusement the way they used to long ago. I'll have my assistant arrange the apartment, I said, bringing the conversation back to practicalities. He'll text you the details and coordinate the lease signing. You can move in as early as tomorrow. And in return, you want what? Diane asked suspiciously. I don't want anything in return, but I do expect honesty and respect going forward. I won't be manipulated or taken advantage of. Not again. Jackson nodded slowly. That's fair, he said, and for the first time since they had arrived, I felt like he was really seeing me, not just what I could do for him.
And Jackson, I added, when you're ready to talk about what really happened 12 years ago, I'll be here to listen. He looked away but nodded again, a silent acknowledgement that there were still truths to be faced. Sensing he had more to say, after a pause, he continued. Diane's not happy about the therapy condition in the agreement. It's non-negotiable, I said firmly. We can't pretend the past didn't happen. If we're going to have any kind of relationship moving forward, we need to address it honestly. Another long pause. I know, he finally admitted. And maybe it's time. Lily keeps asking questions about why we never saw you all these years. I'm running out of excuses that don't make me sound like the bad guy. Because you were the bad guy, I said, not unkindly, at least in that chapter of our story. To my surprise, he laughed softly. Yeah, I guess I was. The admission, simple as it was, felt like the first brick removed from a very high wall. We arranged to meet that weekend at a casual oceanfront restaurant, neutral territory for our first real family interaction. I arrived early, selecting a table with a view of the children's play area on the beach. When they arrived, Lily spotted me immediately and rushed over, while Noah hung back with his parents, assessing the situation with cautious eyes that reminded me so much of Jackson at that age. Did you really build a whole company by yourself? Lily asked, sliding into the seat beside me without hesitation. I had help, I told her honestly. No one builds anything meaningful completely alone. Lunch was awkward, but not unbearable. Diane maintained a rigid politeness that I recognized as her version of trying, while Jackson oscillated between forced joviality and somber reflection. The children, however, were a delight, curious, funny, and refreshingly direct in the way only kids can be. "Why did you and Dad stop talking?" Noah asked between bites of his burger, causing both Jackson and Diane to tense visibly. I looked to Jackson, giving him the opportunity to address this, to begin the honest conversation we needed to have. He said after a moment, surprising me with his directness, "I made a mistake. I believed something that wasn't true, and I hurt your aunt very badly. Sometimes adults mess up, and then it's hard to fix things because pride gets in the way." Diane stared at her plate, her knuckles white around her fork. But she didn't contradict him. "But you're fixing it now, right?" Lily asked, looking between us with hopeful eyes. "We're trying," I said, offering her a smile. The following weeks brought a series of small steps forward. Our first family therapy session was tense, with Diane initially resistant to acknowledging her role in the estrangement. But the therapist, Dr. Patel, was skilled at creating a safe space for difficult truths. "I was jealous," Diane finally admitted during our third session. "Jackson talked about you constantly, Amy, how smart you were, how close you two had always been. I felt like I was competing with a ghost and I didn't know how to win." "So you decided to eliminate the competition," I said, not as an accusation, but as a statement of fact. She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I never thought it would go that far. I just wanted to be first in his life, and then it spiraled, and then we were in so deep there didn't seem to be a way back." Jackson's journey to full accountability took longer. In our individual session, Dr. Patel helped him explore the root of his behavior. "I think I was afraid that if I admitted I was wrong about that night, I'd have to face that I'd thrown away our relationship for nothing. It was easier to keep believing you were the problem." As October turned to November, our family dynamic began to shift. Diane found work as an office manager at a local medical practice. Jackson, with the help of my industry connections, secured a position with a marketing firm specializing in tech clients. The children settled into their new school, making friends and adjusting to California life. Our weekly family dinners moved from restaurants to my home, though Jackson and his family maintained their separate residence even after the initial 6 months I had funded. The independence was good for them, rebuilding their confidence and self-sufficiency. The most profound change came almost
One evening in
imperceptibly.
April, as we were clearing dinner dishes, Diane approached me in the kitchen. "I've been seeing my own therapist," she said quietly, handing me a plate to load into the dishwasher. "She's helping me understand why I felt so threatened by you. It goes back to my own family stuff, feeling like I was never good enough." She took a deep breath. "I'm truly sorry, Amy. What I did was cruel and manipulative, and you didn't deserve it." The apology, delivered without audience or agenda, felt genuine in a way her previous attempts had not. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." By the time Thanksgiving arrived, almost a year after their unexpected appearance at my gate, we had established a new kind of family relationship. Not the unquestioning closeness Jackson and I had shared as children, but something more mature, built on mutual respect and hard-earned trust. I hosted Thanksgiving dinner at my home with Jackson and his family, Martin and his wife Layla, Tony, and even my mother, who flew in from Seattle. As I looked around the table at this blend of blood relations and chosen family,
I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought us here. After dinner, Jackson and I took a walk along the cliffside path that bordered my property. The evening was clear, the ocean stretching endlessly before us, much like the new chapter we were writing. "Do you remember when we used to sit on the roof and plan our futures?" he asked, gazing out at the horizon. "I do," I smiled. "Amy and Jackson's amazing adventures in business." He laughed. "And here you are, the successful CEO, just like you always planned." Here we both are, different paths than we imagined, but we made it. He was quiet for a moment. "I missed you, Amy's. Every day for 12 years. I missed you even when I was too stubborn to admit it." "I missed you too," I admitted. "But I think maybe we needed that time apart to become the people we are now. I'm not sure we would have appreciated this second chance if it had come too easily." As we headed back to the house where warm lights glowed against the gathering dusk, I reflected on the long journey, from that painful night at the rehearsal dinner to this moment of peaceful reconciliation. The hurt hadn't disappeared completely. Some scars never fade entirely, but it no longer defined our relationship. Standing your ground doesn't mean closing your heart. Boundaries aren't barriers. They're the foundation upon which healthy relationships are built. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing to create something new from the broken pieces of the past. As we rejoined our gathered loved ones, I caught Lily's eye across the room. She smiled, a genuine expression so different from her mother's once forced ones, and I smiled back, grateful for this unexpected gift of renewal. Family isn't just who we're born to, it's also who we choose to become, and who we choose to forgive when the journey gets complicated. And sometimes the gates we lock aren't meant to keep people out forever, but to ensure that when they do enter our lives, they do so with respect for the boundaries that keep us whole. Have you ever had to stand your ground with family while still finding a way to love them? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that setting boundaries and offering forgiveness aren't mutually exclusive. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is smile and lock the gate until we're ready to open it on our own terms.